Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today we're going to be taking a deep dive into The Power of Now. That's by Eckhart Tolle.
Hmm.
This book is almost like a rite of passage for anyone, interested in personal growth and mindfulness and all that. Wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's one of those books that kind of makes you really re-examine everything you thought you knew about, yourself and the world around you. It can
Yeah.
be a real eye-opener for
Yeah,
sure.
for sure. So, for those who haven't gotten around to reading this book just yet, or maybe they started it and kind of got a little bit lost along the way,
Yeah.
um, what would you say is the core message? What's the big takeaway? What's the thing that Cully really wants us to walk away understanding?
Yeah. So I think at the heart of it, the power of now is really all about recognizing the difference between who we really are, our true selves, and the constant kind of chatter of our minds. It's almost like imagine your mind as this really skilled lawyer and, they're always building a case against your own happiness, right?
Hmm.
And that's kind of the trap that Tolle wants us to, see through and break free from.
Okay, so it's not just about positive thinking or silencing our thoughts completely. It's more about like recognizing that we are not our thoughts. Is that kind of
Exactly.
what it's
Yeah. It's
about?
about understanding that we are something much deeper and more expansive than this kind of constant stream of thoughts and emotions that are always kind of vying for our attention.
So then how do we actually do that? Because it feels like so much of the time we're living in our heads. We're either replaying the past, worrying about the future. How do we actually tap into this other deeper dimension of ourselves?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's something that, Tolle addresses throughout the book. And one of the things he talks about is how our understanding of reality is often very limited.
Yeah.
He describes different dimensions of reality from, the densest matter to pure consciousness. And he even connects this to some insights from quantum physics,
Okay.
which suggests that, there might be a lot more to reality than what we can see and touch,
Okay.
For example, that two particles, even when they're separated by vast distances, can still be connected.
Right.
There's some invisible web that links everything together.
Whoa, okay. Yeah.
So it starts to get into some pretty mind-bending territory.
Yeah, this is getting kind of trippy.
It is. It is. But it's also, I think, incredibly empowering because what Tolle's really inviting us to do is to question our assumptions about how the world works
Okay.
and to consider the possibility that, we might be capable of accessing a level of awareness that goes far beyond our kind of limited everyday thinking.
Okay. I'm intrigued, but let's bring this back down to earth for a second.
Yeah.
How does this idea of accessing a deeper dimension of ourselves, how does that actually play out in our everyday lives?
Right. What are some things that we can actually start doing to kind of shift out of our heads and into this, now that Tolle talks about?
Well, one of the things that he talks about is this concept of the pain body.
The pain body, okay.
And the way he describes it is imagine this kind of shadowy creature
Okay.
that feeds on your negative emotions.
Mm,
And it grows stronger every time you indulge in anger, resentment, self-pity, all those kind of, heavy emotions.
okay, that's both fascinating and slightly terrifying at the same time.
Right. Yeah, it's like this hidden force that's driving so much of our suffering.
So, okay, if we've got this pain body, kind of lurking in the shadows there, how do we even begin to deal with that? Do we fight it? Do we try to ignore it? Do we send it good vibes and hope for the best? What do we do?
Well, I think our first instinct a lot of the time is to try to resist it, right? To
Yeah.
push it away, pretend it's not there.
Right. But one of the things that Toll says is that, that resistance, it actually just gives it more power.
Okay.
It's like trying to, hold a beach ball underwater.
Yeah.
It's just going to keep popping up somewhere else
Right.
with even more force.
Okay, that makes sense. So if resisting it just backfires, what's the alternative?
Well, this is where the idea of surrender comes in.
Surrender. Okay.
And I know that, that word can bring up, some stuff for people.
Yeah, for sure. Surrender sounds a lot like giving up,
Right.
like waving the white flag and just letting the pain body win.
Exactly. But the way that Tolle talks about surrender, it's not passive at all.
Okay.
It's not about becoming a doormat for your negative emotions.
Right.
But rather, it's about recognizing that, those thoughts and emotions are not the totality of who we are. It's about creating some space between our experience and our sense of self.
Okay. So could you give me an example, like what would that kind of surrender look like in real life?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's say you're feeling a wave of anxiety,
Of course.
right? Instead of trying to, push it away or tell yourself you shouldn't be feeling that way,
Right.
you simply acknowledge it. You say to yourself, okay, in this moment, like, I'm feeling anxious.
I see you, anxiety.
Exactly. I see you, anxiety. I'm not going to fight you.
Okay, so it's more about like creating space for those feelings rather than trying to like force them out.
Exactly.
Wow.
And what Tolle suggests is that the more we practice this kind of, you know, radical acceptance,
Well,
the weaker the pain body actually becomes.
really?
Yeah, it's like, you know, depriving a fire of oxygen.
Okay.
Without our resistance, those negative thoughts and emotions, they start to lose their grip.
That really resonates with me because I've definitely noticed that like the more I try to like control my thoughts or control my emotions, it's like the more intense they become.
Absolutely, yeah. It's
Yeah.
a very common experience. But when we can shift our focus from trying to change our experience to simply observing it,
Like,
that's where we start to tap into that deeper level of awareness,
That's-
that place of stillness and peace that exists beyond the turbulence of the mind.
this is making me think about how often I'm just kind of like going through my day on autopilot,
Yeah.
you know, like eating lunch and scrolling through emails at the same time or like rushing from one errand to the next
Yeah.
without actually like being present for any of it.
Yeah, it's so easy to do, especially in, our modern world.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And
So
so
that-
Tully is really inviting us to slow down,
right.
to savor the simple pleasures of life,
Mhm.
whether that's like a warm cup of tea or a walk in nature
Right.
or a genuine connection with another human being.
So it's not necessarily about like adding more things to our to-do list.
Exactly.
Like, okay, now I have to meditate for an hour every day.
Right.
It's more about just bringing that quality of mindfulness to the things that we're already doing.
Yes, you got it. It's about, finding those moments throughout the day to pause, to reconnect with our breath, to notice, the beauty and the aliveness that's always present.
Yeah.
If we just open our eyes and our hearts to see it.
So it's not about like never having those negative thoughts or emotions, but
Yeah.
just like we don't have to let them, like completely take over.
Exactly.
It's like they're just like passing weather patterns, you know.
Yes.
They come, they go.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that like our whole day has to be ruined because, a little bit of rain came through.
Exactly. And I think when we can approach life with that kind of spacious awareness, that's when we really open ourselves up to like a whole new level of freedom and joy.
Okay, I'm listening. I like freedom. I like joy. Tell me more.
Yeah.
But I got to ask, like, how does this all connect back to like this idea of enlightenment?
Right.
Is that just like some, lofty concept that's only accessible to, monks meditating on mountaintops?
Right.
Or is this something that like you and I can actually like experience in our everyday lives?
Well, and that's a question that, Tolle addresses quite directly in the book. He says that enlightenment isn't some distant goal that we have to, strive and suffer for.
Right.
It's available to us in every single moment.
Oh, okay. So I don't have to like book a one-way ticket to a monastery.
And unless you want to.
Okay. Good to know.
He really emphasizes that true enlightenment is about awakening to the reality that's already here,
Okay.
beneath the surface of our everyday lives. It's about recognizing that we are not just, these separate, isolated selves,
Right.
but that we're part of something far more expansive and interconnected than we could ever imagine.
So how do we access that?
Mm.
Like how do we tap into that awareness, that interconnectedness amidst, the chaos of our daily lives?
Well, Tolle gives us, a number of practical tools and techniques that we can start to weave into our lives. And, some of them are very simple, like even just paying attention to our breath.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to ask about that because I feel
Uh-huh.
like I hear that a lot, like just pay attention to your breath. But
Yeah.
like how does that actually help?
Well, because it's about, anchoring ourselves
Right.
in the present moment,
Okay.
right? So, if you're feeling, your mind racing or you're getting caught up in a wave of worry, just pause and just notice
Okay.
the sensation of your breath entering and leaving your body.
Okay.
It's like a gentle reminder that no matter what's happening up here
Right.
in our heads, we're always here, we're always breathing, we're always connected to this present moment.
It's like hitting the reset button
Exactly.
on your internal dialogue.
Exactly.
This is making me think about all the times I'm just like, you know, moving through my day and I'm not really present for it.
Right.
And how much like richer those moments could be if I just like, took a moment to actually like experience them.
And that's, one of the invitations of the power of now, right?
Hmm.
Is to slow down, to savor the simple pleasures,
Yeah.
whether that's, a warm cup of tea, a walk in nature, a good conversation with a friend.
So it's like we don't have to like add, okay, and now I need to meditate for an hour every day.
Oh,
It's like bringing that mindfulness to the things we're already doing.
exactly, I think.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation, and I think it's really clear that, the power of now, it's more than just like a self-help book, right? It's
Mm,
really a guide to like living a richer and more meaningful life
absolutely.
starting right now. Is there anything else that you would want to leave, our listeners with today?
Yeah, I think if there's one thing that I hope listeners take away from our deep dive, it's that, true happiness, peace, fulfillment, these aren't things that we need to go searching for in the future. They're available to us right here, right now, in this present moment.
Okay.
All we have to do is choose to show up for it.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the power of now.
My pleasure.
It's a journey that never really ends, does it?
It doesn't, Every moment is a new opportunity to, awaken to the beauty and the wonder of life.
So true. Until next time, everyone, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep embracing the power of now.